Hello, welcome. We are the intern ministers at Community Church of New York in Manhattan.
We are Unitarian-Universalists in the process of becoming ordained clergy.
In this podcast, we delve into the life of an intern minister.
We explore the ways our lives and internships intersect and how this is ministerial formation.
I'm Meagan Henry.
I'm Carrie McEvoy. And
we're Rev'ing Up. Wow. Well, hi, everyone. Welcome to the second season of Rev'ing Up. I'm Meagan Henry, and this is Carrie McEvoy, and we are so excited to be with you.
Yeah, it's so great to be back here on the second season. It's hard to believe. And as always, this is a conversation, and we'd love you to keep in touch with us with questions or comments or whatever. We're here. So some ways to contact us would be to email us at podcast@ccny.org. We also have a Facebook group. It's called Rev'ing Up. That's just one V. And so just go to your Facebook groups and go to Rev'ing Up. And also, just like in season 1, we are going to be looking forward to another live event sometime in December. So definitely keep the lines of communication open for that exciting event.
Yeah, I'm excited. I'm looking forward to that. That was one of my favorite things that we did last season. Wasn't that fun? And it was really great because we had all been separate for so long, and then we all got together in the same room, and we had our folks like watching live and commenting live and getting involved in the live community together. It was just super, super fun. So I'm really looking forward to that in December. In the meantime, though, let's talk about what we did this summer. So we can instead of writing an essay, we'll do like a little verbal report. So Carrie, what did you do this summer?
So I had both a relaxing, I took a class that was really amazing. And I also did 4 worship services, 2 congregation and 2 at community church. And it was really great. I just got to kind of talk about things that came out of things that I was learning in seminary. And then I got to take a walk in the woods, and I videotaped that and created a service around that. So it was really a way to kind of expand my horizons in worship planning. So that was really great. And then I also got to officiate my first 2 weddings.
Wow, yes. Congratulations.
Yes. So it was really, it just seems like every opportunity is ripe for deepening what it means to be a minister and how I feel being a minister. And so it was just really, really a great summer. How about you? What did you do this summer?
Carrie, it's so interesting that you said all of that, because I feel like we're definitely seminarians in formation, right? Because I'm like, yeah, my summer was all about feeling more like a minister too. And I did my unit of clinical pastoral education over the summer. At the end of that, I don't know if officiated is the right word. I presided over 2 memorials and graveside memorials that were ashes internments at Greenwood Cemetery in Brooklyn, New York. And so you did weddings, I did memorials, which is interesting because I think that for both of us, the things came to us that we needed to do and get experience in, right? Because I've done weddings before, but I'd only done like 1 memorial. So it was kind of neat. And the clinical pastoral education, the CPE unit, was really the big thing that I spent 11 weeks on this summer. And it was amazing.
Yeah, I remember I did my CPE last summer, and I was one of the very few programs that was able to do it in person in a hospital setting, and it was transformational. And I don't know, it'd be really fun to kind of compare experiences about your CPE and my CPE experiences, because it really was the moment where I felt like a minister. I don't know if that rings true for you.
Yeah, it definitely does. So my CPE was at Bellevue Hospital in Manhattan, and I live about a mile away. So I walked to and from every day, which was a really great spiritual practice for me, and built into, 5 and 6 days a week. That walking was really important and helpful for me to process and help me be present and grounded on the way to the hospital, and then to kind of process and come down on the way away from the hospital. And so let's do that. Let's talk about our different experiences. Because I also had that feeling of like, oh, I feel like I can see, I felt more authority as a spiritual care provider through the experience of clinical pastoral education. And one of the things I wanted to say about it is some people might not really know what CPE is, this clinical pastoral education. Mine was a traditional, like, first CPE unit. So and it was in a level 1 trauma hospital. And I chose Bellevue Hospital because it is the hospital. It's the city hospital of New York City. It's kind of iconic. Like, I remember as a kid, if you'd see like a sitcom, and you can go back and see these, you didn't have to be a kid growing up when this was happening, but like you'd see like I don't know, Night Court or something like that. And they'd be like, you're going to Bellevue or something like that. It was just kind of like iconic. You'd hear that, like, Bellevue is the name that you hear for hospitals. So it was kind of exciting to have an opportunity to go there, but also because once I found out the mission of the hospital, I was just floored. I mean, they don't turn anyone away. You do not have to have health insurance to receive top-notch care at this medical facility. And, there's just, it's every, like, gunshot wounds are coming into the emergency bay. There's, it's just very, very, like, busy and hectic. And they have multiple psych units where they have a, I'm not exactly sure what goes for like the children. Like, there's it's kind of a intermediary, like, children's unit where if there's children or teens or minors who are there because of some sort of psych reason, oftentimes it's suicide attempts or suicidal ideation, and they'll be there for a few days and get treated, and there's a whole team that works with them before they then figure out where they should go from there. I didn't work on that unit, but I did work on an adult psych unit, and I also worked on a medical floor. So what happens as a CPE student is, I mean, I came in and, like, I've been in a hospital, like, I don't know, 4 times in my life. Like, I have no hospital experience, but because of the mission of Bellevue serving everyone and giving, equal, really good care to people from all different backgrounds, I was really attracted to going there, because I feel like in my ministry with most Unitarian Universalist congregations that I might happen to serve, I feel like the population is more like more people who have families, who have support systems, have money, have insurance, health insurance through their work, or through the marketplace or something like that, as opposed to working with people who are housing insecure, living in shelters and coming in off the street. It was just a different population that I was able to interact with and serve and get to know, which I felt like was really important for rounding out my own ministry skills. Mm-hmm. So tell me a little bit about your experience, and we can do some comparing and contrasting.
Yeah, I think our placements were fairly similar. I did my CPE at Bridgeport Hospital, which is the city hospital for Bridgeport, which I think is the largest city in Connecticut. And The population was very similar to the population you were serving in your CPE. It's a population that is different than the populations that I've worked with in the UU congregations I've been involved with. So, and there was something really important about I intentionally chose that for the similar reasons to your selection as well, because I wanted that experience with all kinds of people in all stages of wherever they are suffering. Of course, it's Bridgeport, Connecticut, so we didn't have it's not as large of a hospital. I did spend some time on call, going to the trauma room. I think it's a level 2 trauma there, but I did see some traumas. And we were assigned certain units. So I was in the burn unit and just a medical floor. And then we took some turns leading groups for the psych units, both geriatric and adult psych. And while I was there, this was summer of 2020, we had very little pediatrics. The pediatric cases were sent to New Haven. So they were just transitioning out of pretty much all the floors being COVID. And when I was there, the COVID numbers were going down. So those units were getting cycled back into their more traditional emphases.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So one of the things I thought was really interesting, because I didn't really know much about CPE when I started into it. And it was like, oh yeah, I mean, I had watched some like info things about it, so I knew some, but there's 400 hours that must be accomplished during this 11 or 12 week time period. And it's 300 hours that are clinical. So that's 300 hours in that time period of going and directly working with clients. So, knocking on the door, sticking your head in the room. Hi, I'm Meagan. I'm the intern chaplain. Would you like to speak with the chaplain today? And just, getting in the door, just, introducing oneself and getting in the door, and then being there to listen as folks are talking about what's going on with them and giving them, a kind listening ear. And then also the other elements of praying with people, which was really, I found that really incredible, because as a person who grew up in a fairly I would say not super religious household, although I was raised UU, and we went to UU church, and I went to UU summer camp and stuff like that, but I didn't really pray as a child, and I wasn't taught how to pray. I did encounter prayer in high school and was like, oh, okay, this is like a new thing for me, talking to God. But this summer I talked to God with people and on behalf of people a lot, like multiple times a day. So I feel like God and I now are like having this much closer relationship, which was really, really interesting for me. And one of the things that I did at the end of my unit, we had to do 6 verbatim, which I can, that's the whole thing. But at the end, we had a choice. Our 6th one, we could do a variety of different kinds of things. We could choose which one we wanted to do. So I did a verbatim with God, because I was like, I've been talking with God all summer. I might as well have a conversation with God and put the dialogue down on paper, do a spiritual reflection about this conversation, and then share that with my learning cohort and my supervisor, my educator, so that, I can see how much I've grown from when I came in at the beginning being like, I'm uncomfortable in hospitals. I'm kind of afraid of them. I don't deal well in this environment. It's very institutional and cold and yucky. And so I don't feel comfortable here. And I'm not a person who prays like this every day. So all of these new things. And then by the end of it, at 11 weeks, being able to be like, yes, I'm having a conversation with God. It was just huge growth, even in just that way. But there were many other ways in which I felt like I grew a lot.
Yeah, the praying thing was really interesting for me too. I came from a Catholic background where if we pray, it's prescribed. So we say the same words every single time. And so coming into a situation to where I basically offered a prayer every time I left the room, because that seemed to be what, I mean, unless they were, I gathered that they were not religious at all, but most of them were. So I would always offer a prayer at the end, because it's, and it's not, there were a lot of Catholic patients at this hospital, so that part was pretty comfortable. I could pull out the Catholic prayers and felt comfortable with that. But I found prayer a way to indicate that I was listening, and to really, it was a really powerful moment. Sometimes I felt like I was just, calling it in, but the patient was really moved by it. So it was a really profound moment to basically, what I tried to do was pull in all of the things that they were telling me and what they were struggling with and what their situation was, and just lift it up and say, I'm here, I'm listening, and I am offering your interest. I'm offering whatever it is to the universe, because I want you to feel like there's something to connect to. There's some source of hope for you. So it was really, really profound.
Yeah.
And definitely a learning opportunity for me, coming from a similar background to you, except that the prayers that I did were proscribed from my growing up background. And then the other thing is that I would also when I offered a prayer, I would ask them if they wanted to pray, because there's a lot you can gain from the way someone prays. And
one of my favorite things was when we would pray together. They would start talking too. And so we would start bouncing off of one another in the prayer.
Uh-huh.
It was really cool.
Yeah, that would be really cool. I didn't really do much of that, but because I just was really wanting to know how they prayed, because there's so many different ways to pray, particularly from traditions that aren't my own. So prayer was a really powerful moment.
It was. And one of the things I recognized is that because there are in the hospital where I was serving at Bellevue, there's a spiritual care department. The director of the spiritual care department is a rabbi, and the multitude of the kind, like there's a lot of different kinds of chaplains that are on staff. So they have a Carmelite monk, they have an imam, and they have Protestant and Jewish. And then they have residents who come in and spend either 9 months or a whole year doing chaplaincy. And they are from all different backgrounds. And they choose, I can tell that they choose people to create a religiously diverse cohort. So it's never, like in my experience, they try very hard not to have just everybody all being, like Protestant Christians, or even just like Catholic and Protestant Christians, but like mixing it up a little bit. So in my educational cohort, the people who I was with, who were all doing one unit together, there were 6 of us. There was another Carmelite monk. There was a UCC. There was Episcopalian, and there was Eastern Orthodox, and Jewish, and me, Unitarian-Universalist. So there were 6 of us. I was the oldest. Everyone was 30 or under, except for me. And not only is the head of the spiritual care department a rabbi, but because the person who was going to lead my cohort left like 2 weeks before we were starting, our director had to bring in someone else to be our educator so that she could salvage this program that we had all like signed up for and we were planning on doing. And she brought in a good friend of hers and colleague who was also a rabbi. And she was amazing. Someone who I think started the Rikers prison chaplaincy program at Jewish Theological Seminary. And she'd been a practicing rabbi and then became a full-time chaplain at Rikers and had done that for like 20 years or something. Like, she's just very, very experienced. So it was incredible, the kind of diversity of religious thought and practices that I found. I just love being in an interfaith environment. It's just really, it really deepened my own experience and my own understanding of religion and spirituality by us sharing and talking a lot about, we all supported one another. It was a very sweet group. It was really, really good. I felt very lucky and happy to be in that group.
Yeah, my cohort was great too. There was myself, Unitarian-Universalist. There was another UU, and there were 3 Episcopalians, 2 in the same school. And then there was an Eastern Orthodox young man, and the supervisor is a rabbi. And then it's also a director of spiritual care at Bridgeport, and the director of the program is Eastern Orthodox. So yeah, so it was not as, I mean, it was diverse for sure. And I loved that it was, and they tried to be intentional about it, although it was a challenging year for CPE in so many ways. Mm-hmm. So I think a lot of people who would have been participants backed out because it was COVID. Mm-hmm. And then others were really keen on doing it because it was COVID and they really wanted to do it, such as myself. So yeah, so there was always this, well, I was able to help the Christians in the group kind of frame things from a more interfaith perspective, because as a UU, I'm very comfortable in that space. And I kind of was jealous of their prayer books. Like they had it all in one book. And I'm like, we don't have a book. It's everything. And then there was always that moment when I came through the door and the patient was trying to figure out where I was coming from. Like, there's this woman who's coming in, says she's a chaplain, and some traditions have no idea what a chaplain is. So trying to let them know and try to be really low key about where I was coming from, so that I could lift up, I'm here for you. So they would, if they asked me what my faith tradition was, I would say it very quickly and just turn it right back to them, because so trying to come in as being open to wherever they are, coming in a white female middle-aged person's body, which has its own perceived baggage or assumptions, and really trying to come in as a guest and as someone that was there to help them make sense from wherever their tradition was. It was a really interesting kind of way to come into a room.
Yeah, I would say, I'm Unitarian Universalist, and I am an interfaith chaplain. So I am able to talk to anyone of any different faith or no faith at all. And so that was helpful for some people. I actually we talked about this when people would get rejected, like when we say, like, I'm a chaplain, would you like to talk? And somebody would say no. And very early on, we talked about it in our cohort. And one of the things that I really loved was something that our educator said, was that, people who are in the hospital have very little agency. And many of the people who we are serving, especially in this hospital, are people who do not have a lot of power and authority in their own environments and lives. So the best thing that the chaplain can do for someone who says no is to respect what they say and let them determine whether or not they want somebody to talk to them, instead of forcing them into another thing that they don't want to do. Giving them the agency of saying no and respecting it and walking away politely is the greatest gift to that person in that moment. So I just thought that was a really cool way of framing it. And also just, being a person who was, oftentimes the people I was serving in the hospital many of them were very religious, and very like deeply, like had very deep and full prayer lives and had an idea about what it means to be religious and how to pray. So it was, like you said, Carrie, you know, listening to them and how they prayed was a cool educational experience also, and also just like a way to get into a spiritual space that was an opening and an understanding of different ways of being spiritual and having conversations with the divine. It was very beautiful.
Yeah, I remember I was talking to a reverend friend of mine before I went into CPE, and he said something about a chaplain being the conduit to the divine, to divine love. And so when he told me that, I kind of freaked out. I'm like, what does that feel like? I mean, can I do that? And so I would spend time meditating and trying to tap into what that felt like. And I couldn't. So I felt like I was broken and that I was never going to be a successful chaplain. But then, you know, it's kind of like an electrical wire. It needs somewhere to flow before it flows. So it didn't happen every time, but there were moments where I felt that energy, like that connection, that compassion, that love. And I was just in the moment so deeply. And then I would just get out of it and I was completely disoriented. And I just fell in love with the whole world. Does that kind of experience ring true for you at all?
Oh, definitely. I mean, I many times had the experience of walking out of the hospital and half a mile later on the way home, realizing that like, I'm just wide open to the world right now. Like I've got to start, not closing off to the world, but just recognizing that when I walk out of the hospital, I'm just so open to receiving everything that's coming in. And sometimes that could be really overwhelming, but I got in so many really sweet and heartfelt and lovely conversations with people on my way out of the hospital, because I was in that receiving and open space. And it's just so, one of the spiritual reflections that I did for one of my verbatims was around this idea of, in Buddhism, of, thinking about the whole world and thinking about how much we are interconnected and interdependent. And when no matter who it is that I'm interacting with on the street, in a store, on the bus, in the hospital, in my spiritual home, my congregation, what is happening, if I can see the person I'm interacting with as in this principle of, we are all interconnected, and this person one time was my mother. This person one time was my child. This person one time was was my grandmother. So just this way of like looking at a person and recognizing the oneness that interconnects all of us. And that was something that I felt and that I could articulate as a Unitarian Universalist. When I say we are all one and we are all loved, we are Unitarian and we are Universalist, I could relate that to the other people in my cohort who are not UU and who are very curious about what is Unitarian Universalism. But ways that I could explain it were through these things like this story of the Buddha explaining that we have all been related to one another from previous lives, or that we're all interconnected, that I was able to draw on the different world's religious teachings in order to explain and help the other people in my cohort kind of understand what I would mean when I would talk about these things. And that's how I would do my spiritual reflections, which was really helpful for me as a UU, because each of them had a very strong religious traditional background. And so they would use a text as their spiritual reflection, like this is like Job, or this is like when Moses this or that, or this is like when Aaron, so they had very specific stories from their texts that they could draw upon. And I really wanted to I enjoy being able to open it up and think about other traditions outside of Judaism and Christianity that we could draw upon. So I felt like that in some ways that was a little bit of my contribution to the overall group discussions and spiritual reflections, which I was very grateful for my UU upbringing and context and grounding, and work as a religious educator, where I've explored so many of these stories. And as we were leaving, they were like, "You have so many great stories. We need to know where you get all these stories," because we learn so well through stories, right?
Mm-hmm. And also, there's the sacred text of human experience.
Oh, yeah. That's beautiful.
I think both of us wrote a bunch on that sacred text in our CPE experiences.
For sure.
Yeah. And
I'm really enjoying this, the sacred text of this human experience with you and having these conversations.
Yeah, me too. It's I feel like there's so much more we could talk about on our chaplain experiences, and then everything else, weddings.
Yeah, we have a whole season to be continued, right? Yes, to be continued, because all of these things from CPE are bubbling up that I'm like, oh, I should talk about this, and I should talk about that, and this is what, but we don't have enough time. No, I think we should wrap things up today, and we will, keep talking. We'll talk again next week. We'll keep reaching out, and we love to hear from our listeners and viewers. So please remember to reach out to us on the Rev'ing Up Facebook group or podcast@ccny.org. And we'd love to hear from you.
So thanks for listening and thanks for watching. And we just look forward to having a whole nother conversation all this season.
Amen.